G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Trewin. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing John St. Pierre from Rhombus Group based near Boston in the United States. Thanks for your time today, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Troy.
Let's start with how we know each other. Goran from Norin Rad reached out, thought you'd be a great guest for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, so I'm the chairperson of a company called the Rhombus Group. And the Rhombus Group is a holding company. We have 6 privately held businesses within our portfolio. Our largest is a $100 million commercial construction company here in the United States. And we have some other smaller upstarts in a couple other industries as well. So that's what we do today. And I'm the chairperson overseeing those companies and looking to continue to grow them.
Now, really looking forward to hearing the journey because you've got a big failure to talk about, but maybe tell the audience a bit about the book that you've written. I think a lot of your experience from that failure is in that book.
Yeah, exactly. So last year I wrote a book called The $100 Million Journey, and it wasn't necessarily the journey of my success to $100 million in business that did happen. It's actually the story of my failure. To fast forward, Troy, we can dive wherever you want to go into that. But I had created a business back in 2003 that was everything I ever envisioned I wanted to grow as a business. It was the business of my dreams and the industry of my dreams, with the people that I loved. And we spent 15 years of blood, sweat, years and tears of growing this business. Successfully grew it to north of $55 million in global revenues. And one day, 6 years ago, in a boardroom, I was asked to stay in the boardroom by our private equity firm, 6 months after they had invested $20 million into the company. And I was asked to leave my business. And I was fired from the very company that I'd co-founded and grew for 15 years. And a lot of my entrepreneurial learnings came flashing back to what had just happened? How did this possibly occur? I plan on doing this for the rest of my life and growing this business. And through that failure, I wrote the book, came up with really principles of learning that I now apply to my businesses today.
Wow. And what did the business do for those 15 years?
So the business was in sports and sports management. And I was a sports enthusiast, played ice hockey growing up. In 2003, I was with a couple of friends and we all had a passion for ice hockey. So we decided to start up this business in ice hockey just for fun. It wasn't even supposed to be a business. It was supposed to just be a hobby type of venture. But most like most entrepreneurs, sometimes it's hard to have a hobby. You always try and find the business angle to it to grow something. And inevitably, we started building the business and doing international tours, ice hockey tournaments, ice hockey camps. Why aren't we doing it in soccer, as we call it here in the US, or football? Why aren't we doing it in that sport? We can do that. We do it in lacrosse. And why don't we do it in American football? And start expanding all these sports and areas across the globe. And it became a true business of passion. But we started learning how to make money at it and how to grow the business. And so that was kind of what the space was.
And how many team members did you get that business up to?
We had 700 at its peak.
Wow. Holy shit. That's big.
Yeah.
Out of a hobby.
Exactly. Yeah. And we had visions to grow it even further. We wanted to grow it to 100 million and beyond. But unfortunately, fate had other ideas.
And what can you put it down to? Did the business continue on after you left or?
So the business culture changed significantly after I left. The company's culture changed significantly. There's a lot of legal entanglement between the business and other individuals. And unfortunately, when COVID happened, all sports and sports travel came to a halt. And the private equity firm determined they weren't going to fund it through the COVID crisis and put it into bankruptcy.
Wow.
And the whole company and brand and everything, it was 2 years after my departure, ceased to exist.
Yep. Wow. I'm definitely going to read your book.
I appreciate it. There's some good stories in there.
And how did you start out? Maybe go back to, college, university. Did you have a corporate job before you started that sports business?
Yeah. So in college, I had a pretty unique situation, Troy. I was a Canadian, grew up in Montreal, and came to the US to go to college. And one of the benefits of that is you get a student visa. You can come to the US and go to school, but you don't get a work visa. So I wasn't able to work in the US while I was going to school. But there is a little bit of a loophole, which is if you open up your own limited liability company in the US, you don't have to be on a work visa.
Hmm.
You can own a limited liability company in the US without having a work visa. So I did that. And I found an opportunity to run a painting franchise and ran a painting franchise for 2 summers while I was in college. And that really taught me so much about business, how to do sales and estimating and hire employees and fire employees and train employees and accounting and payroll and cash flow and everything else. It was a really, really good internship, if you will, while running a business and making money. But following that, I actually took a corporate job with the franchise company from the painting franchise company in Chicago. And so I moved to Chicago for a couple of years and worked for the franchisor. And I was training college students on how to run a painting business. And so I had learned, how to train people how to run their business. Then I jumped on the .com wagon. So in the late 90s, I was part of a group that started handymanonline.com, which is a contractor referral service. You could go on the internet, say you need your roof done or your kitchen done, and we'd send you out contractors to give you estimates. We were venture capital funded out of Silicon Valley in California, and started growing that company like crazy until the .com crash. And the .com crash came, and I'm like, okay, now what do I do? Do I go get another corporate job somewhere, or do I take the entrepreneurial path? And that's and it was actually in April of 2003. It'd take me a little bit of time from the crash. I started 2 companies. I started Rhombus Group, which was our construction company, and I started this little hobby hockey business. And I had these 2 businesses that I was incubating back in 2003. And the rest, if you say, is history, because one of the companies grew successfully and one of the companies grew and fell off the cliff.
Well, I did the same thing in 1999, started 2 tech companies at the same time. But so I was some weeks working 100-hour weeks, sleeping under the desk. You would have been crazy busy as well.
Yeah, for sure. But that, as a young entrepreneur, that was so much fun.
Mm.
That was around 30 years old and fully vested into, no, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to get a high paid corporate job. I want to build something for myself. And I was willing and ready and able to go through those times to build something.
And with Rhombus, so what kind of construction do you do? And isn't it extremely difficult not only to make a profit, but to stay in business? I mean, that's coming up to now 22 years.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I learned through the sports company is sometimes growing your company patiently over years with the right people is the right way to build a company, as opposed to trying to go too quick and build your business too quick. So over the years, first of all, our company does facilities maintenance, painting, flooring in different commercial environments for large national accounts here in the United States and Canada. And through relationships and building an incredible team, the business has continued to be able to build and grow and prosper. We've made a couple of acquisitions, integrated those appropriately, and been able to successfully scale and grow the business in a sustainable and controlled fashion. That doesn't mean it's not without its issues. We could talk about the learnings and the issues that business has that we're overcoming. But in the sports company, we tried to grow too quick, and we went far too over our skis and fell right off the cliff. And there's a lot of learnings from that failure that I vowed to myself I'd never repeat again.
Yeah. So in construction, then it's a fairly safe corner of that industry, facilities, and a lot of relationships with big clients. That makes a lot of sense. So how old were you in 2003 when you started out?
31. No, not even. I was 20. Sorry, my apologies. 28.
28, right?
Yeah.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of Rhombus over the decades now?
Yeah. So Rhombus today does a little over 120 million in revenues. Started with zero. I think more importantly is, to share a pretty fun number, is in 2016 we were doing 3.5 million in revenues. And from 2016 to 2021, so in that 5-year period, we went from 3.5 million in revenues to 100.
Wow.
And so that was the big growth spurt within that business.
And was that, it sounds like you didn't learn your lesson about growing slowly, eh?
Yeah.
Was that a lot
Well,
through acquisition?
correct. We made 2 acquisitions during that time. And your point, that growth is a big growth, but the business had stabilized over so many years and prepared itself for that trajectory. And it didn't happen overnight either. There was a couple of acquisitions in there that really bolstered it to that level.
Yeah, great. And what about, so a number of full-time equivalent team members that you started with back in 2003, and what are you up to now?
So we started with 2, myself and my co-founder. And today we're approximately 150 with all the companies.
That's great. That's a wonderful growth. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Oh, Troy, that's a good question, right? Because I went from a massive failure in 2018 to growing our construction company to hit the $100 million mark in 2021. Scratch that, 2022. And I would say we had a party with our business when the construction company hit 100 million. And I can remember the cake coming out and the champagne popping and everybody having a good time and going, wow, we got here. It was always my dream to grow a $100 million company. And here we are. Isn't this awesome? But then the next day I woke up and we had cash flow issues. And we're like, oh boy, growth takes cash. Where's all our cash? What is going on? Right. And you go right back into the depths of entrepreneurship and you're like, oh boy, growing a company 100 million is hard, but maintaining a company 100 million is even harder. And how we're going to grow is even harder than that because it takes a lot of things happening in the right motion. And so the more revenue you have, the more people you have, the more customers you have, the more problems you have, the more cash flow issues you have. There's a lot of other things that come into play. So I don't believe success has been attained yet. It's only milestones along the way that you achieve.
And what does success look like to you?
So I'm going to bring that to a personal level, Troy. One of the things I learned in the failure was I had a business plan, but I didn't really have a life plan. And now when I coach and work with entrepreneurs, I ask them this simple question, which is, do you have a written down long-term personal life plan? You see, I always used to meet with our executives and our leaders, and we sit down for 2 days off-site and come up with our strategic business plan, where we're going to take this business. But I never did it for myself. And so when I had this massive failure, one of the problems I had is I was running my business one way, but it wasn't connected to my life plan because I didn't have a life plan. I was just saying, hey, this business is successful. Everything else will fall into place. And so I really learned to align my life plan with my strategic business plan to achieve what I want in my life, because that's what success looks like to me. And now when you ask the question, what does success look like to me? I think about Jim Collins in the book, Good to Great. He has the hedgehog concept, which is, what are you most passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? And what drives your economic engine? That's what success looks like, that intersection.
Yep.
And for me, that's helping entrepreneurs build the business of their dreams. So today we have 6 companies, we have 6 CEOs and presidents. And on the chairperson of the company, I'm helping them build those companies, and I coach other entrepreneurs to help build their businesses. That's what success looks like for me. And the fulfillment of achieving those goals within each of those companies is success for me.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Number one thing I'd recommend for marketing is your name and your brand. One of the things that I've learned over time is, whether it be your team, whether it be your customers, or the logo you have and how you represent the cultures and values of that organization, when your brand and name comes up, what do people say about it? How do people feel? And that goes also internally, because your internal people are the ones working with your customers. They're the ones helping give people referrals to come work for your business. And I think way too much right now is marketing that's being spent on dollars, but then when people look under the hood, It's one customer in, one customer out. There's not long-term relationships being built with customers because you haven't really focused on what your brand really means, what your values and culture really means.
Yeah, I think Jeff Bezos nailed the definition of brand. He says it's what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yes, exactly.
And how did you fund Rhombus?
So when we first started Rhombus, there was 4 partners, 2 active partners and 2 silent partners, and we actually funded it with a contract. So we had a contract that we had sold. We secured the contract, and then we formed the company. And we determined in order to get off the ground, we'd need $100,000. We each put $25,000 into the pot. We each owned 25% of the company, and we were off and running. And we never had to put another dime in, for the last 21 years of growing the business. So that's kind of how it was funded. But it was funded with a contract in hand, which is a great place to be.
So have you had to take additional investors in since the 4 of you, the 4 shareholders started the business?
Ultimately, not. And that's one thing I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about. We actually took people out. So from the 4 original partners, I'm the only one remaining. The 3 other partners have been bought out over time. I've secured a majority ownership level in the business, and I have 2 other partners that are now CEOs and presidents of our companies that are minority partners in the business. So one of the things I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about, and it's kind of a learning that I had as again, Troy, is equity is the most valuable thing you're ever going to have. You should not give it away loosely. You should protect it with your life and always try and grow and protect your equity in a business, which is something I didn't do with the business I failed in. I diluted myself over time and lost complete control of the ship. And so now, I really am one to preach to entrepreneurs. Be really, really careful about diluting your equity, taking on investors to dilute yourself. Can you grow the company without it? And I'm really big in helping entrepreneurs generate their own cash flow to grow themselves.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
I'm going to say yes and no, and let me explain. If I had plenty of funding today, I would not do the construction company necessarily, but I would do a holding company. And what I mean by that is I think there's an incredible opportunity to acquire small to medium-sized businesses with aging ownership that are very, very successful companies that generate really good cash flow, that have really good management teams, that are financeable, and or with the capital you could acquire, and integrate a brand new culture of intrapreneurship in that business, motivate the management team to take the business further, and scale those businesses and exit. So I believe the idea and concept of a holding company of small, medium-sized businesses with capital is a really good business to invest in.
Absolutely. I'd love to do something like that. And I wish we had something that USA has here in Australia, which is, I'm sure you're aware of, the SBA, Small Business Administration Loan. If someone wants to acquire a business, I think it's a phenomenal mechanism because the government is actually protecting jobs. There's a lot of businesses that will be coming on the market the next decade or so as boomers retire. And something like only 80% of businesses put on the market actually end up selling. So what do? They close them down, jobs are lost. So that's a great scheme.
Agreed.
Have you listened to any of John Warrillow's books or his podcast?
I don't believe so. What would be one of his best books?
Well, he's got 3 cracking books. Built to Sell, The Automatic Customer is the second one, and then The Art of Selling Your Business is the third one. And he's got a great weekly podcast that's been going for 8 years. We've had John on our cast a couple of times. I'll shoot you through those books and his podcast. But he often has maybe every 4th or 5th guest is someone in either from private equity doing a holding company strategy like you just spoke, like a roll-up. So they'll buy a principal company, which is the lead in the group, usually the biggest, and then will then start rolling up smaller companies in that niche or that industry. It's a really fascinating podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. I have not.
Here we go. I'm sure this one's going to be a spicy answer. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah, yeah.
Or do we have to read the book?
Yeah. Well, I think the book will share the story, but you know, when I was growing that sports business and We were growing fast and we were having fun. The decision to bring on investors into our business was a really exciting one. We were around 55 million. We had a pathway to 100 million. We wanted to bring on some capital to fuel that growth. And I can remember the ink being dry and the money hitting the bank account. And all of a sudden, the temperature changed. And for the 5 months following that investment, I believe it was, being scrutinized on every decision we'd ever made, feeling just this lack of trust of anything I was saying was not correct, and having this target on my back. I can remember a month before my termination calling one of my business mentors going, I don't even know what to do anymore. Like, there's this target on my back. I can feel it and I don't know how to get out of it, because I'm kind of in this cycle where private equity companies, when they come into a business, they tear it apart. They have their playbook and they run it, and nothing against them. That's their strategy. That is their plan. But it takes your culture, and we had really focused on the culture of this business and the people, and I had so many best friends in that business, and everybody got just turned upside down. And that moment of stress, it now in hindsight, the day I was terminated was probably the darkest day. And since then, it's been, things happen for a reason. And if I had stayed in that role with that stress for multiple years, and COVID hits and all these other things hit, I would have been in a dark place for a long time. And so there was a relief valve there that in hindsight, that happened for a reason. And I gained so many learnings of, introspectively, Troy, entrepreneurs need to look back at themselves in the mirror and go, what did I do to contribute to this situation? What did I do to put myself in this position? How did I make myself so vulnerable? Those were all questions in the aftermath that I had to go discover.
I'm definitely sending this episode to Doug Taylor from Taylor Chip. They've got a great business in Pennsylvania. They've got 7 stores. They started out selling cookies. I had him on the podcast late last year, and we were talking about they're raising funds at the moment. They're about bit over $5 million US top line. He shares on the podcast, profitable, wanting to open more stores and go outside the state. And he was looking at VC and private equity, and I said, I've never done it, but I've heard a lot of war stories, particularly on John Warrillow's podcast, and I'd be very careful about doing that. As you know, they want their money back in a time frame, usually 5 to 7 years, and something like tenfold. And they put a lot of pressure on the business, which there are some good VCs and private equity people out there, but it's still a gamble whether you get an arsehole or not. And they take over. So I did convince. We had a chat after that recording. Doug's now looking at crowdfunding because they've got quite a big customer base, and they don't need to raise that much money, in my opinion. So, yeah. I do warn business owners about looking seriously at the VC and private equity path. And you'll hear on John Warrillow's podcast a lot of those. There's some good stories in there, but a lot of them just don't end well.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I share my story, I hear a lot of other stories. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of really good private equity and venture capital people. They are doing their job. They're being hired by their investors to go maximize return. And they believe what they're doing is the way to do it. But when it comes into the culture you're trying to create in the business that you've envisioned and dreamed of, it's pretty risky. And one thing I learned was this concept of your self-financeable growth rate, which is how fast can your company afford to grow? That's how fast you should grow. And you should reinvest in your company to grow more net operating cash, which then fuels your ability to finance more growth yourself, to grow yourself and stay within those limits so you can keep control of your ship and your mission. So that's what I preach to entrepreneurs today, which is, grow a little slower, but grow with your own cash and invest in your own growth.
Yeah, totally agree. We can get a bit too ambitious, and we need to be protecting that equity for as long as possible. And sometimes that is just putting the brakes on and not growing as much as we want, which is hard as entrepreneurs because we're very driven, we're optimistic.
So hard.
Have you heard of Jam Group out of Canada?
No.
Oh, you'll hear it in John's book. One of his books he talks about. I had Christy Herald on the podcast late last year. Phenomenal story, but similar space to your sports business. So they organise sporting events around USA and Canada. They're quite big now, and they're growing through acquisition as well. I'll send you that podcast. And I think you'll love the culture piece. You wrote a book on culture as well, but phenomenal some of the things they do when an employee starts on their first day. It's a wonderful story you'll hear on the podcast.
Love that.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Myself. As I mentioned before, I'll give you two things. One is knowing what you're trying to achieve through this thing called business. Are you running the business, or is the business running you? Is the business a vehicle to achieve your life dreams, or is the business just a vehicle you want to run as fast as you can to show you can do it? I had to really work on that myself. And this concept, which is really one of my biggest learnings of all, Troy, which is, and it's the title of my next book, Patient Ambition.
I like it.
Entrepreneurs lack patience. They have a lot of ambition, but they lack patience. And that patience is very, 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 very dangerous. And it doesn't matter if it's in your career, in your personal relationships with your kids, it doesn't matter what it is. I've learned there's a lot of magic in patient ambition.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
That no matter what destination you get to, cash is always a problem. And if you don't come up with the right systems, mindset and systems, I should say, around cash, it will smother you. And it doesn't matter, if you're a $2 million business today and you're like, well, once I get to 5 million, I'm not gonna have this cash flow problem anymore. Guess again.
Yes, you will.
Right? When it comes to people and taxes and bad debt and situations and potential lawsuits and just other things that happen as you grow your business, cash will always be at the forefront of business stress. And you wish that you could just wave a wand and that not be an issue anymore, but it always will be.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Helping people achieve their goals and dreams, including myself. I do think that entrepreneurship is a vehicle to achieve individual goals and dreams. Unfortunately, sometimes we become a slave to our business and we basically bought ourselves a job and it's not achieving that. We're stressed, we're overworked, we're not spending enough time with our family, we're out of shape. I give all the different components of stressors to it. But if you can actually build the business of your dreams the right way, you can achieve your dreams individually. And that's what I take a lot of pride in, is helping entrepreneurs build the business of their dreams that achieves what they actually want to in their life. And that gives me a lot of joy.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
I'm going to come back to this idea of patient ambition. It by far is the biggest mindset shift that I've had. And I've tried to execute this as well, this mindset shift with other entrepreneurs, because we live in this world today, Troy, of instant gratification. I want it today. I want to create a new vertical business line today. Oh, I see an opportunity. Let's go do that now. The shiny object syndrome. Let's get all these things going. And what we don't realize enough is we have a lot longer than we think we have. I have a 30-year life plan. I'm going to be 80 in 30 years, but you know what? I don't want to do anything else. I'm going to be in the entrepreneurship world for the rest of my life. I don't want to stop doing stuff. So I got 30 years. You can do a lot in 30 years. I don't have to do it next week or next month or next year. I just take these building steps and have patient ambition.
You would have heard Bill Gates quote, people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but underestimate what they can achieve in a decade.
Yes, it's actually a quote I have in my book, starting one of the chapters.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Cash flow habits. Alan Milts, who's a fellow Australian.
Yeah, had him on the podcast. Yeah. No, I think
he's
South African actually, originally.
Possibly. I think he lives in Australia now,
he
though.
Does.
Yeah. So Alan Milts helped write the cash chapter of Vern Harnish's Scaling Up.
Yep.
And he actually helped, and I interviewed him for my book. He interviewed 3,000 CEOs, and not one of them could articulate how to calculate net operating cash flow.
Yeah.
They know what their P&L says. They know what their balance sheet says. And as Alan Milts says, it's like reading a murder mystery novel and all you're reading is chapter 1. You don't even know how the book's going to end and you think your business is doing okay. And so the idea of really understanding your habits around understanding your cash and how to manage such cash. I've been using the cash flow story, which is the software that Alan Milts has. with our company, and we moved cash. I mean, keep in mind, it's a $100 million company. By using his cash flow story, we moved our cash over $1.9 million last year by changing our working capital days and just the habits around our receivables and payables. $1.9 million of cash flow we didn't have that we now have because of that float of cash conversion cycle. Those habits you have to master to grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had Alan on 3.5 years ago now, back in episode 124. It was a great chat with him. Are you a small business owner who is ready to take your professional growth to the next level? Sign up to the Grow a Small Business Weekly newsletter. This is your go-to email every Friday and will take about 2 minutes to read. Join the Grow a Small Business community who, like you, are investing in their professional development. Each week, we curate valuable resources, whether it's expert advice, books, podcasts, industry insights, or actionable strategies. We've got you covered. Leave your email at growasmallbusiness.com/weekly. Now, you've hired a lot of people through the two companies over the more than 2 decades now. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
One of the principles of entrepreneurial success I talk about in my book is you need to build a culture of intrapreneurship. I love entrepreneurship, but the people that work within your company, if you create a culture where they are intrapreneurs within your company, where they can make decisions, they abide by the values and beliefs and behaviors that you are supposed to have in your business, and you provide them the opportunities to own their domain and build and grow within your company, you can create incredible things. And so that is the one big learning I've had that's created big wins. And in the instances where people are just coming for the paycheck, never works.
No.
So do you hire for your core values and behaviors? Do you have situational leadership in place to lead people directionally in the right way and meet them where they are and help them grow? Are you invested in their personal balance sheets? Do you care about their personal lives and balance sheets to help them grow within your business? When you create that culture of entrepreneurship, a lot of things flourish from there. A lot of success with phantom equity programs where you're tied to the success and growth of the business. Here in the US, I'm fascinated by this concept of ESOPs, where employees and employee stock ownership plans where they can own a piece of the business. We haven't done that yet, but I really believe we're moving to a society today where, look, I can be a freelancer and go do Uber and work for myself, or I can work for a company that's going to really reward me and help me grow and help me flourish in my personal balance sheet and career. And that part really excites me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of ESOPs or employee share ownership plans as well. We had an expert on about 5 years ago, Craig West, here in Australia. And he's got like a doctorate in or master's in tax. I don't know, he's unwell. I don't know how he could do it, but he loves tax and all that. So he set up this one of the leading ESOP providers here in Australia. And part of that is references a lot of international studies on the impact of ESOPs. So from memory, putting in a share ownership plan into your business can increase productivity between 7 and 21%. But the other big kicker is retention doubles from 5 years to 10 years, which, as you know, saves a shitload of money and boosts performance. Have you read The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack?
No.
I'll send you that. But he's very big on ESOPs, and I think you'll enjoy that book. Early 80s, it was a Caterpillar factory going out of business, or they were shutting down that area, and management bought it for, I think it was 9 million. They only had 100 grand, so the bank lent them 8.9. The bank manager wasn't there much longer after that loan, apparently. But they, a bit like Ricardo Semler in Maverick, which I loved. I read in the 90s. I don't know if you've heard of him, but in Brazil, hyperinflation, and they tried every management style, over the decades, and he summed it all up in his book, as does Jack Stack, and he's landed on a lot of great lessons in that book. ESOP's one. The other one is Jack's pretty much known as the godfather of open book management. So firstly educating your team, and Semler did this in Maverick as well. Teaching your team how to read P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, etc., right down to the cleaners, from top right down to, and then educating them financially as well and supporting them, and they've helped create a lot of wealthy families and just middle class families from that approach.
Love it. That's fantastic.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Can I say the same thing?
Yeah.
To me, it's building that culture of entrepreneurship. You just gave the perfect ultimate result of what happens when you create this culture of entrepreneurship. If you could double your tenure from 5 to 10 years, and that's an ESOP you were talking
Yep.
about. I wasn't necessarily even talking about that. But if you can create a culture within your business that people want to be there, they want to grow there. They don't see themselves anywhere else because they're so bought into the mission and the vision and the values of the business. And they feel a sense of ownership in the business, even if it's a false sense of ownership, but they feel a sense of ownership and they're growing into personally and financially through your growth of your business. That is the key to success because you're only as good as your team. And I think we've all learned that as entrepreneurs. And you mentioned a really good point. Every hire you hire that turns out to not work out costs you a shit ton of money. And everyone that works out for a 5 to 10 year period of time, it becomes a leader in your business, really bricks off your back as an entrepreneur to help you grow and build this business. So to me, that's really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. The numbers that float around, they say it can be any between 1 and 27 times their annual salary, all the hidden costs and, lost,
Yeah.
profits, etc. Other A players leave because you haven't acted fast enough on a B player or a C player.
Yes. Yes. I've had that happen.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Through abundance. So I'm one of those individuals that, when I hear about work-life balance, I'm like, well, I don't care about work-life balance. I want work-life abundance. I want everything, right? But I'll tell you the biggest thing, Troy. It's principle number 7. I have 7 principles of entrepreneurial success in my book. Principle 7, and by the way, we've talked about 4 of them. We talked about build and protect your equity, grow your own cash flow for growth, create a culture of entrepreneurship. But principle 7 is how you need to move from CEO to chairperson. We're always told, Troy, you need to work on your business, not in your business. And you're like, how am I going to do that? I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm stressed out. I'm all over the place, right? Like I got to grow this business. But if you can replace yourself in every role that you do, because you properly build your team of entrepreneurs and leaders within your business, and they're trained to kind of grow and do better than you would do in certain roles in the business, and you can elevate yourself to a strategic level. I call that the chairperson level, where you're not operating in this business on a daily basis. You can then strategically spend time elsewhere. You can spend time in other investments. You can diversify yourself. You can spend time on service projects. You can spend time with your family. You can go on vacation and not worry about the business. You can do all these things if you set up your business for success the right way. And that was a key learning for me. So, today I'm the majority owner of, for example, that construction company. I don't work at that construction company. I have a CEO and president that run that business better than I would ever run it. And I can work with them strategically on how we take the next steps for growth. I can work on that business full time to see it continue to grow and flourish. And to me, that's what every entrepreneur should strive to, as opposed to controlling everything they do and not training their employees properly and trying to be the chef, cook, and bottle washer of their business indefinitely. That to me is a secret of success.
Yep, totally agree. I sit on 5 boards. I chair most of them. The longest 2 have been about 8 years now. Tasmania's second largest craft brewery is one of them. Another one's Australia's oldest golf course down here in Tasmania. We've got accommodation. And it's my favourite role as chairperson because you don't, I like to describe board meetings or boards as intellectual piranhas. You throw an issue on the table, rip it apart. You don't attack the person. Then the best part, the CEO or the general manager then goes and execute the day-to-day. You don't have to worry about that noise. And it's solely focused on strategy. And it's a great corporate governance structure to force people, and particularly founders, if they can step up onto the board and out of the day-to-day to be, as you said, be working on the business, not in it.
Agreed.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
A good amount. I spent a lot of time, as I could tell you do as well, reading, listening. I don't play music in the car. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm learning about some new AI technology on YouTube. I'm always, investing time. I have a podcast myself that I've been running for 5 years now with my best friend, Rich Hoffman. And we get to have interviews with great people to sharpen the saw every single week. So I spend a good amount of time investing in my growth as a leader so that I can also in turn help other entrepreneurs in their growth.
Yes, you guessed correctly. I do a lot of professional development over 14 hours a week on 1.5 or 2 speed, mostly podcasts, but a lot of audio books as well when I'm driving around town or taking the dog for a bushwalk or shooting hoops in the sun. It's just using up that dead time. People say I don't have time. I just cannot believe when I'm speaking with business owners, they don't do any
Yeah.
professional development. I said, just do half an hour a day or 2 hours a week. It's, you'll be able to find that time.
Yeah. Well, hold on a second here. I just want to make sure I heard what you said. I just graduated to 1.5 speed.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't listen to anything at 1 speed anymore. And I went from 1 speed to 1.25, tried 1.5. I was like, that's too fast. Came back to 1.25. Now I'm at 1.5, and you're saying you can do up
You
to
can go to
two.
2. I was nervous as well, but I haven't gone back. The only time sometimes Alex Amosi, I have to put him back to 1.5 speed. If there's something around data or analytical he's talking about with numbers, I do have to bring down. And other times when I want to quote someone or write down a quote, I put them back to 1 speed, and it is like they're talking underwater at half speed. I just cannot. I'm not used to it. And I also talk very fast as well. So
Yeah. Well, I was hearing an analogy from, I think it was even Elon Musk just talking about AI. And they're like, we have a hard time processing something at 1.5 speed, right? Or 2 speed in your case, or 2.5 speed. And AI will do it at like 1 million x.
amazing.
It's just they can
Yeah.
read the whole book and know exactly what you're talking about in a second.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the advanced technologies we're getting. But okay, I'm going to try and push myself to 1.75.
And have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yeah, and a lot that are unknown to the point you're making about listening to other people and other podcasts. And I was fortunate to have Vern Harnish as an example write the cover review on my book, and his book Scaling Up is one of my most important business books that made an impact on me. And I got a chance to meet him and Alan Meltz, and they didn't even know that I knew who they were because they're, but I think there's a lot of people that made an impact that way. And then I've also had mentors along the way that from the first job I had in college all the way through that I worked for that I respect today and have always been great guides for me.
Yeah, Vern's Scaling Up is a great book, but also Rockefeller Habits before that. I'm not sure if you've
Yep,
read that one. Yeah.
I did.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Yes and no. The board of directors is our three owners within our business. And I have, a couple of advisors that are more mentors on the side, but we don't have an actual board, independent board.
Now, John, you're one of the few I've had on that's exited a business, albeit not that well. Any advice for the audience thinking about or that should be thinking about exiting their business one day?
Yeah. One of the best quotes I heard about this, Troy, was the question, who is your customer? And you automatically think, in my construction company, it'd be, well, it's the large retail chain that has 100 locations, and it's, these are your customers. And the best response I heard to that question is, no, 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 no. The customer is the person who's going to buy your business. That's your customer. How are you preparing your business for your customer? And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs grow their business and then one day wake up and say, I'm going to sell my business this year. And their business is ill prepared to exit, as opposed to building their business for that next customer. And by optimizing the business for that customer, you may realize, well, I don't even want to sell this business. This is fantastic. I'm just going to keep this cash flow machine going. But optimizing your business for that next customer has been something that I'm really putting into practice today. I don't know if I'm ever going to sell my company, let alone sell it next year. But if I optimize it for the customer, I'll always be ready.
All right, John, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Managing cash flow.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Scaling Up.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
So one of the ones I do here is a podcast called the All In Podcast. And it's not professional development as much as it's thought provoking with VC investors that are a lot further along than I am, that I learned from their intellect.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Alan Milt's Cash Flow Story.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 22 years ago?
You need to have patient ambition. You have a lot longer than you think you have to grow this business. Grow it the right way in a slow, controlled fashion if you want sustainable growth and success.
Thanks so much for your time today, John. I've really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations on the growth since 2003, over 22 years now, starting two companies at the same time, one in the sports area, which went under in 2018, and the other one in construction, still going and doing very well, 120 million top line with 150 staff, with two of you starting that. Congratulations on the growth, and thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Troy. It was fun.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.